I'd like to share you a story about Ken Klopek.
Cool.
So must have been December 2017, I took my kind of new boyfriend to a Christmas department party at our boss Betsy's house. And I was a little bit worried. I was like, who's he gonna talk to? What's he gonna talk about? I was so nervous about what was gonna happen that night. And he befriended a guy named Ken, and Ken is the husband of Leslie, who runs the email program here at Speedway. And they became fast friends. They talked about Model A's and bodies and bodywork and engines and cars, and they were just best friends right away. And it was a little bit of a, he's got someone to talk to from now on. And we talked about that night a Model A body that was for sale in Omaha on Craigslist that we had been looking at, and I've been trying to kind of push George toward hot rods away from motorcycles a little bit. And Ken knew the body we're talking about. He had watched it on Craigslist, and it was a friend, Nick Hazing, out of Omaha. Ken talked about how such a good body it was, and that's a good idea, we should go look at it. And so it kind of pushed George a little bit closer to where I was trying to get him to want to go look at this body. And so the next week, within a couple days, we went up to Omaha and to look at the body, and we made a deal, and we bought it from Nick, and George's sons, Hunter and Josh, came up, helped us load it into a trailer. We took it home, and it sat on the floor of the garage for a couple weeks while we tried to figure out, get our ducks together. And
such a nice body, by
it
the
is
way.
a good
like
body.
if I would have had money in my bank, I would have.
Yeah, it had the doors already done. It had a lot of stuff. Like Beautiful. It had the ceiling ribs, and it had a ton of stuff for the door handles and locks and all that kind of stuff. It was ready to go, and a lot of the body panels were there too. It just needed body work, and so we were nervous about that and I didn't want to hurt it. Like, I'm not good at welding, and I didn't want to learn on this body. And Ken is an expert body man, and he's also an expert at Model A's. He's always wanted to build a Model A.
Really?
And so he knew the body lines, and he knew what should happen and the structure, and he knew the stance and looks and all of that stuff. And so George and him made a plan to get together once a week and start to work on this body. And so once a week, Ken came over and spent a couple hours with George, or sometimes I was just there, and he would do body work and cut out panels and weld them in, and he showed George what to do, and he was really patient, and then started mudding, and they spent so much time together. And they're like each other. They're like, sometimes it's candy coated, sometimes it's coated with other things, but they have this shell. But inside is goodness and kindness and wanting to be helpful, and they're good men. And so progress moved on the Model A quite a bit that year. And but hot rods get stalled sometimes, and just time and money and effort and all that. But we got a lot of the progress done on the body. In August of 2018, George's oldest son, Josh, was killed in a motorcycle accident. And we were kind of, everything stopped because life had to take over for a little while. And once progress started to work again, we didn't really know it at the time, but the Model A turned into a sort of coping mechanism for George. So he was able to go out to the garage, either filled with people or by himself. Sometimes it was quiet, sometimes there was noise, and he just worked through this grief because of this hot rod and because of his friend who was there to help him this whole time. And Ken was all in, and whatever George needed, Ken was there. And he spent a ton of time away from his family to help with this project. And there was a lot of friends that came over to help, but really I was thankful for shop time, hot rods, and friends, and Ken when it came down to it.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so they worked on it a lot, and they decided at some point that we're gonna get this thing ready for the wedding, which is gonna happen in June. And so then we had a timeline, and so we knew it had to get done under Ken's direction. We finished the body work, they finished the body work. Ken and George painted the frame. Ken helped pick the color. It's a Ford color, a Subaru color. It's called ginger ale, but it's perfect for this hot rod.
Yeah.
It's kind of vintagey
Looks
looking.
great,
yes,
yeah.
in the sunlight it looks goldy and green, and it's beautiful. So Ken chose that color, and so and then Ken also helped with what should the suspension be, what should the stance be. There's a body line that's strange here, let's work on that more. He helped sway away from other decisions that were being made to make him more of a proper hot rod. And so I owe Ken, I was always working on George, because he wanted to fill the top of the coupe, and I was like, I don't think that's a good idea. And then Ken kind of pushed him the rest of the way, so I was like, yeah, Ken, you're my best friend. But they just worked together and made this thing happen, and we had it in time for the wedding. And
it's great, and you bring it to Cars and Coffee a lot of times, which is awesome, and you see it rolling in, and George is happy.
5,000 miles on it this year.
Wow. Great.
Yeah, so
how cool is that?
The Sunday before the wedding was the first drive through the neighborhood, and then we trailered it to Columbus because we just weren't sure. The night of the wedding, I learned how to hot wire a car because we took it to Hy-Vee to get more ice, and then it wouldn't start. There was a flat spot on the starter, so I hot wired it in the parking lot with him. We've driven it in Colorado for the hill climb. It's gone to Austin. He drove it to Austin for a race. He drove it to Washington, Kansas to watch Dave Hansen and his son race the mini sprints.
Yeah. That's cool.
And he just drives the wheels off of it. And
that's awesome.
Yeah.
And
awesome.
He's now perfectly asselated into the family because in your family you have to have a hot rod.
You have to have a hot rod.
Yeah.
Have to wonder. And that's a strange thing about, it's a strange good thing about hot rods and shop time is that the hot rods have little tiny successes, and you can build on that, and it propels you forward in the build. So if there's a moment where you're like, what am I going to do, or that's really expensive, or I'm stuck, or you can work on this other thing and finish that and make progress, and that progress propels more progress, and all of that's good for you. It's good for a person to feel success that way. And in George's case, it was good to say, it's going to be okay, and things are hard, and they're going to be hard, and they're going to be hard forever. There's always going to be sadness. There's always going to be this intermix of loss, but there's a path forward, and there's a goal in mind, and that goal in this case was this Model A.
Love it. And the friendship with Ken, how cool is
Yes,
that was forged, and that's going to be forever.
For sure.
I was going to ask if George has another car on the drawing board now that get Ken back over.
We're talking about a Lincoln, but we're just trying to figure out space right now. So
That's really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can relate to the car building, not so much with the hot rods, but when you're talking about the little successes and having that be motivators for moving on, it's very similar with race cars. I've built several at this point in my career, and it's the same thing. The next one you're like, oh wow, I can do that better next time if I do it this way, and so that was really fun to hear about. I'm curious, what was your relationship like with Ken prior to him meeting George?
Oh, sure. I had met Ken. They came when I had built a garage on my house in 2011. Ken and Leslie came to my garage warming party. I've known Leslie I think she's been here for 7 years, and I've known Leslie that whole time, and she's fun to chat to. And every time I talk to her, I learn about something because she has so much marketing knowledge to share. But I didn't know Ken that well. But we've gotten to know him in spades. He loves his daughters. He talks about his daughters all the time. He loves his wife, and he's a Volkswagen guy too. And so he just built a Volkswagen for his wife to drive to work, and he's got a Carmen Ghia. He's
awesome.
All these things he's got plans for, but doesn't make time for. So he sacrificed all of his time away from his family cars to come work on George's car, which meant a lot to us too. And
Right. That's really cool.
Yeah.
It says a lot about his character too,
For sure.
and how giving of a person he is. Obviously, he cares a lot about you and your family too.
For sure,
so,
yeah.
that's awesome.
That's been amazing to see the outreach of George as a firefighter and the brotherhood of that surrounded him in this time, and then also the car world is the same kind of brotherhood. Everybody just, how can I help? What can I do? We never wanted for anything. We always had someone to help us.
That's what I love best about the car community, car
Yeah.
culture. It's people from all walks can become best friends, right?
Oh, yeah.
I think this story just emphasizes that it still can be a great bonding experience, great coping mechanism, and it's great therapy. I love it.
Definitely.
Very few people build things alone. You usually have a crowd around you that helps get things done and make things happen. And,
Yeah, very cool.
Yeah.
Love it.